Hi guys, so Douglas Ross, who's the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, was interviewed by Clyde 2 Radio in Scotland a few days ago, where he was talking about a whole range of issues including the referendum, Brexit, fishing and the pandemic. Now I want to focus on fishing here because he was asked a question by a man who's in the fishing industry who has voted for the Conservatives all his life, he claims, but he's considering now voting for the SNP. Douglas Ross responds to him, and he's somewhat economical with the truth. So let's hear what he had to say.
Hi, good morning.
Your question, please.
Hi, Douglas. I've been a Tory supporter for all my days, and I'm quite heavily involved in the fishing industry, and I'm struggling to give you my vote this time over the debacle the Tory government caused over the fishing. How can you convince me to give your vote this time? What are you going to do about it? We're really struggling. You know, SNP is probably going to get my vote over what the Tory government did. How can you convince me?
Well, Peter, first of all, thanks for your support in the past, and I understand how difficult this has been for the fishing industry. That's why I've not tried to minimise the problems you and others are facing. That's why I said we had to get a compensation scheme up and running. It didn't go far enough to begin with, so I was calling for it for the catching sector, and that's right that that's now available for the catching sector. But we can't just continue to compensate for losses. We've got to get to the root of the problems, and the root of the problems are added bureaucracy and red tape that wasn't there before Brexit, that was there from the 1st of January. Some of that has started to be streamlined, but not anywhere near enough. So I want to continue working with the industry. That's why at the start of the campaign I held another round table with the fishing industry. We've got to look at international swaps. We've got to look at making it easier for groupage, which is when a number of smaller suppliers are in the same consignment. And we've got to make sure that all the problems there is with red tape and bureaucracy are minimised and reduced as much as possible.
And I agree with that. It's a good idea to try and minimise the amount of bureaucracy, minimise the amount of damage that Brexit has done to the fishing industry. But unfortunately, some aspects of the fishing industry will not survive. Because, for example, when it comes to certain shellfish, they're being taken from Class B waters. They have to be purified and then sold on. But by the time even if the UK decided to purify them in the UK, they would not be fresh by the time they arrive in the market in the EU. So that industry is dead. You can compensate them, but it's a waste of time and a waste of money because these industries are not going to recover, thanks to Brexit. Now, the alternative would be rejoining the single market and the customs union, which the SNP want to do, but Douglas doesn't support that position.
Peter, you're saying the alternative for you is to vote for the SNP, and you will have to look at all the other parties. But of course, the SNP's proposal is to take us back into the EU, which I think is what fishermen have voted to come out of. And they were convinced that it would be better for them to be outside the single market and the customs union. And now look at the result of that. You're talking about compensating them for the lies they were told. And the people who are compensating them are taking public money to compensate fishermen for the lies they were told. You don't see Jacob Rees-Mogg putting his hand in his pocket. You don't see Nigel Farage putting his hand in his pocket. You don't see Boris Johnson taking money out of his personal bank account to compensate these fishermen. Why is it the taxpayer has to compensate these fishermen because of the lies told by Brexiteers? May be disappointed with the current scenario, but over the next 5 years we will gain complete control over what we can fish, where and when, and who can fish in our waters. Now,
this is where he's a little bit economical with the truth. Now, what he's saying is not exactly completely wrong, but it's not completely true either. So it says here, this is from the BBC, and I'll leave a link in the description. This is in regards to the fishing industry. What happens after 2026? So Douglas has said that the UK will take back control of all of its waters by 2026. At the end of the adjustment period in June 2026, there will be annual talks to set the amount EU fishing boats can catch in UK waters and vice versa. At that point, the UK has the right to completely withdraw EU boats' access to UK waters. This seems to be where Douglas ends reading, but you need to go on. But the EU could then suspend access to its waters for UK boats or impose tariffs on fish exports from the UK to the EU. So yes, technically you could end EU boats' access to fishing waters, but the EU would just not, you're not expecting the EU just to roll over. They would respond in kind by suspending UK fishing boats' access to EU waters and imposing tariffs. Tariffs could be extended to other goods, but it would be in the proportion of the economic impact of the fishing breach. And then there is an arbitrary arbitration system to deal with to resolve any fishing disputes. But the core problem here is that, yes, technically you could stop EU fishing boats accessing UK waters, but the EU would respond in kind. But let's hear what else Douglas had to say.
With the SNP, they'd hand that straight back to the EU.
Peter?
Okay, Douglas. Douglas, well, you know that.
But rejoining the EU would be a better situation, because you'd be free to catch what you, well, within reason, what you want, but you would actually be able to sell it. The problem is not catching the fish at the moment. The problem is selling the fish. That's what Brexiteers keep avoiding.
It's incorrect, because in 5 years' time from now, when we're supposed to take back full control, you know that Europe has us over a barrel with the energy, and that is a direct debate. They can turn off the energy till the UK. So we are.
Actually, I'm not familiar with that, but it is in relation to tariffs on other goods. I don't think the EU would cut off energy supplies to the UK. Technically, they could, but I don't think they would go down that road. But they could impose tariffs on other goods, saying, okay, you're going to play hardball when it comes to fishing, then we're going to play hardball when it comes to something else.
Over a barrel with Europe over the fishing. So that is incorrect what you're saying, and that needs resolved.
Well, I don't think it is incorrect what I'm saying, Peter. You know, we are clear that we continue to get more and more share of our quota over the next 5 years. The biggest uplift is this year, and then by 5.5 years from the agreement being signed.
Remember that Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers said, as soon as we leave the EU, we will control all of our waters. Now, even if that were true, even if it was the case that the UK controlled all of the waters, it's irrelevant to the real problem at the moment. The real problem is exporting the fish that is caught. Even if tomorrow the UK had control of all of the waters, what difference would it make to actually selling the fish?
On Christmas Eve last year, we will have full control over who fishes what, where and when. I would have loved that to have happened far quicker. I think a lot of the fishing industry hoped that would be the case, but that is our direction of travel, and that's where we can be in just a few years' time. With the SNP, they'd take you straight back into the EU, and then you would have no control at all. It's what fishermen in my Murray constituency and across Scotland have been campaigning to come out of for the last 40 years. And if you give your vote to the SNP, you're effectively telling them it's fine, take us back into the EU and all the regulation and red tape from within the EU.
Is he serious? The regulation and red tape of the EU. The problem here is the red tape post-Brexit. There was no red tape before Brexit. When the UK was a member of the EU, there was no red tape. Or very, very little red tape, but nothing in comparison to what we're seeing today. So Douglas Ross's response is, don't vote for the SNP because they might return you to the EU where things would go back to the way they were before. Which makes absolutely no sense if that's what he's arguing for. Let me know in the comments section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?